On this episode of AV Week, creating a standard for global AV deployments and looking ahead to the economic forecast of 2020 and beyond. All that and more next on AV Week.
The network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.
This is AV Week, episode 435, recorded Friday, December 20th, 2019. Resilient.
Support for AVNation is brought to you by Kramer, AV Beyond the Box, and by Christie Digital, and by Biam.
This is AV Week, your weekly wrap-up of audio-visual news and information. My name is Tim Albright. I am your host. With us to discuss the news and information one last time for 2019. First and foremost, Ms. Corey Schaefer from QSC. Welcome, ma'am.
Happy New Year, Tim. Happy holidays.
Happy holidays. She's probably the warmest of the five of us here, so let's say that. Corey is up on the West Coast. The rest of us are, Chuck and I.
It's the chilly 70.
Yeah. So also with, as I mentioned, Jim, Chuck Wilson from NSCA. Welcome, sir.
How you doing? Glad to be here.
Absolutely. Ernie Beck, I get to hang out with in DC with the Future Go group and their video show. Welcome, sir.
Hey, Tim. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And Ernie is with Capture Design, before I forget saying that, and Integrate Baltimore. I want you to talk about that at the end here too, Ernie. Last but not least, Mr. Jonathan Blackwood this is his first time since taking over for our old buddy, Mr. Tom LeBlanc at Commercial Integrator. Welcome, sir.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So not for nothing, let's kick it off with Commercial Integrator and our friend Greg McCormick writing about 2020. It's the State of the Industry Report 2020. I like this quote, "Don't get too comfortable, kids." One of the things that Craig mentions here is the fact that AVIXA and a number of other organizations have forecasted, let's call it rosy pictures for the next couple of years. Yes, there's going to be growth in the industry. Yes, there's going to be money to be made. However, there is a but here, and a very big one. If you talk to economists, Chuck, every year at BLC, their business leadership conference has an economist. The event that I do with some other folks, the folks at PSNI, they also have an economist. These economists have been saying for a couple of years now that there is a chance for a recession between now and, let's say, 2030, 2032, depending on which one you look at. Jonathan, I think that was one of Craig's points here is don't get too comfortable. Yes, it's still a bull market, as it were, for AV, but don't get too comfortable. As you guys are talking to integrators, what preparations are they making? Or are all of them saying, you know what, it's fine, we're going to make money for the next 10 years, we're good?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both. I think that there are certainly people that are kind of the I'll believe it when I see it type of people, and I'm going to ride the wave of growth while the wave of growth is available to me, and I'll deal with the repercussions when they appear. But I think that there's a lot of people that are one of the things, recurring revenue, which I know we talk about a ton within the industry. I think that a lot of companies are trying to implement those strategies as soon as possible so that when the recession hits, they already have that upfront and they have the systems implemented, and then it's just an operating expense cost, which is a lot tougher to cut out than capital expenditure where you're bringing in a completely new system. But ultimately, one of the things that Dave Lubuskis said when Craig was interviewing him for this report was that AV has now become a necessity for organizations. You can't operate without audiovisual equipment, where maybe even 10 years ago it could be argued that AV is a luxury. So I think that for the most part, it's strengthening the business, streamlining, making sure that there's not waste in any spots, and then just hoping for the best and hoping that the recession isn't going to hit us too bad, because at the end of the day, the recession will really determine what happens to companies. But if you have all your ducks in a row, then you'll have the best opportunity to kind of stay afloat during that tough time.
Chuck, as you are going around the country and having conversations with different integrators and your members? What are they telling you about this forecast?
Well, and I agree with everything Jonathan said. What we use is this electronic systems outlook more than anything. So every 6 months, our members get this, and we look at it. It's done by FMI, a research company that focuses on kind of the new construction renovation side of things. So we always look at it like we will know with a pretty good runway. We'll understand what is happening at the start end, the front end of where our projects lead us by checking out what architects, engineers, the design consultants, and everybody have on their work in progress lists, more or less. So we get this snapshot periodically like I said, every 6 months. So with that, it's become our leading indicator for the last 20 years or whatever. So when I go out and talk to people, they all have that on their desks. They all ask me about it. And the view that we have on that looks like for the next couple of years, everything will be fine based on where our business is originated from for a large part. The other thing, like Jonathan said as well, is people need what we offer now. People want what we offer. It helps them with their business. And a lot of what we're doing today helps them when they face a recessionary period in their business. So we're there to help them with the ability to communicate during those times. So I think what we're doing is we're diversifying enough, moving ourselves into these somewhat economically insensitive type markets like we talk about in the report. So from my vantage point, it looks good. And then with the caveat for now, and so our economists tell us for now we should be fine.
Yeah. Corey, that whole for now thing is important because most of us on this call, I would say all of us on this call, remember the last recession, which was roughly 10 years ago, a little bit more, and the time it took to kind of recover, right? And all of us have friends who lost businesses, lost jobs in that time period. Is there anything we can take from that 10 years ago or 11 years ago to not only, help ourselves if it does turn to this and does do a downturn, but also to provide, a little bit of help to those who were not in positions of decision-making 10 years ago, but they will be this next time around if a downturn does happen.
Yeah, I think we have to look at history. Because history helps us also look forward, right? So we have to learn from it. And I think at our company, at QSC, we're preparing in the way of, we have 3 business units and they're very, very different, right? So the system side, what's a really good indicator for us on the system side is talking and being really close to the consultant community, because those guys are working on projects that are typically 3 years and further out, maybe. So that's a really good indicator of what does the business look like. Talking to end users and what do they have planned, but we're really able to see, are they turning it up, turning it off? And being, so how do we learn from what happened before is understanding, if you look at history, that we do see a recession about every 10 to 12 years. So know that we're likely going to see something here very soon and be conservative and mindful for it. And then if you can diversify, like we have the system side that I mentioned, but we also have what we call live sound, and watching that vertical and what's happening there. And it's changed a lot to, a lot of online. We see the cinema side, which is another business unit for us. In that, it kind of is lagging what we've seen in systems. In systems, we saw a lot of consolidation happen. In cinema, we're starting to really see that now. And then also we're seeing on the cinema side that they're starting to kind of actually edge into what's sort of our systems business, because if you go to cinema today, it's not just a cinema, it's an event space, right? So it's restaurant and it's bars and it's potentially bowling alleys. And so we're seeing these 2 business units kind of overlap a bit. And we're grateful that we have these 3, because maybe when one is up and the other one's down, it helps us plan better and share multiple resources and so on. But one's coming, it's great. I love Dave Labuscas's comment as well, Jonathan, that you said is that, AV is really a necessity. We see it in retail. Retail's moving to more experience spaces versus having inventory. kind of gone are the days when you go into a place and actually walk out with something. You go into a place to play with it and then order it. It's interesting. I mean, this is all really good stuff for AV, I think.
Well, it's all things that have happened, honestly, in the last 10 years, since the last recession, that changed, right?
Yeah.
10 years ago, it was a completely different system. And those experienced designers have kind of come out of that environment.
And you hit on something. You said these experienced designers, but I was almost hearing experience. The big buzzword of the last couple of years has been we create experiences, and we really have. I think today this is the last show before the holiday, and when I think about holiday gifts, I want to give an experience. Everybody's seeking out, where they can go and have a lasting memory and experience, and that's great for us in AV.
Absolutely. Ernie, I want to take a different turn with you on this. Talk about it from the forecasting and Ernie design systems, and talk about it from that aspect, but also talk about it from the work you do in trying to get young people into the industry. How do you have that conversation about whether the economy and the future of a potential job in AV, and the fact that everybody on this panel is saying, what, yes, the economy may take a downturn, but this is an industry that's pretty stable, because, back to Mr. Labuscus, everybody needs AV.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. It's funny, I actually started my career in the AV industry during the last recession in 2009. So I was coming into a systems integrator, and they were getting off these large capital projects. And I think what kept them afloat, just as an aside, was leveraging more contract vehicles. We're here in the Maryland, DC area, so there's a lot of government work. And I think the thing that really helped weather that lack of construction project work, those large capital projects, was those smaller contract vehicles that they had that were doing more smaller scale projects at a larger volume. So the point is that whether it's 2009 or 2019 or 2022, right, when the next recession hits, companies have to put themselves in positions to succeed. Just like the article says, and Dave Labuscus says, they need to diversify their service offerings. If there's an area or a business unit within their offering package that they're not really focusing heavily on, maybe it's managed services, maybe it's unified communications, maybe it's digital signage. Now is the time, while the industry's hot and things are producing, to focus and put resources there, so that when the inevitability of a recession hits, those other business units can help carry their weight and spread it out. So how you translate that conversation to students, quite honestly, they're not really thinking about the recession, right? They're thinking about, how do I get a job? How do I get a career? How do I get a return on investment in my education? How do I pay my bills, right? And so for them, I think one of the benefits the AV industry can offer to students is that there is, again, not a recession-proof business model, but a recession-resilient type of industry. If you were to tell those same students, listen, if, let's say, you're interested in hands-on, because I work with a lot of students, or have worked with a lot of students, rather, I should say, that are, they say, I want to be hands-on. I like to build things, right? Well, you could become an installation technician in the AV industry, or you could go work in construction, let's say. But what I would say to them is that the benefit to the AV industry is it's a more recession-resilient industry than construction. Construction, when times get tough and they stop building, you stop building, right? Whereas in AV, you don't necessarily have to have a construction project for integrators to do work, right? They can be doing managed services. They could be doing ongoing support and maintenance. They could be doing any number of retrofits and projects that aren't tied to a capital budget. So I think the benefit, maybe a VIXA, NSCA, these other organizations that are promoting workforce development should take, is that, I don't know how they would work that really into their marketing pitch, but I think it's a conversation that's worth having with students, because they're ultimately going to be subject to the economic ebbs and flows, just as we all are.
And don't you think maybe this time, when there is a recession, we'll even be more resilient because of the managed services, right? I mean, many organizations have gotten that message. Chuck, do you have any data on how many of your members now are offering services?
Well, we do have the data, and I just I'm not 100% sure I trust it, because I don't think we've done a good job, Corey, of really defining what we mean by managed services versus service contracts versus a service level agreement versus help desk versus all this stuff.
AV as a service.
Yeah, AV as a service. We got so many definitions flying around that I question that, this 12% number that we use here. But 12% is our best guess about how many of our members, or the revenue produced, of the total revenue produced, 12% of it is based on recurring. The the state of the industry data, I think, Jonathan, is a little lower than that, right? So
a bit lower. And I think that we've had this conversation, and we're trying to figure it out ourselves. Is that right now managed services and AV as a service are really used interchangeably, but they're two different things. And if you ask me to tell you which is which right this second, I'm not sure that I could, because it's like, I'm not sure that the industry has decided which is which yet. So I think that that's something that we're trying to better understand, so that our readers can better understand, do they want to get into managed services? Do they want to get into AV as a service? And which is which?
Yeah.
So there's just jump in. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Chuck.
I was going to say, so there's that, Corey, where we're not really sure what the definitions are. What I do know is everywhere I go, that's what they're talking about. So they're thinking the exact same thing we're talking about here, is that, in order to hedge against, future downturns in the new construction, let's say, or the project-oriented side of the business, and to create that stickiness that we gain from having those managed services or embedded services with the client, it's like it just makes the best business sense. Even more important, when you look at our metrics, like in the project side of the AV space that we're in, is that at best, and especially corporate AV has this margin erosion happening big time, but at best, our anticipated GP on a gross profit on a AV installation is just a little bit over 30%. When you look at the GP stats that we have on the managed services side of that business, it's at 60%. So it doesn't take a genius to figure out that if I can tilt that scale towards the managed services as a percentage of revenue, my blended GP will tip in favor of having a much higher profit, which means that, and it makes those up and down months with projects, it makes it a little easier to get through those times. And like in a seasonal place like where I live, is we have to work really, really hard in the summer, because in the wintertime there isn't that much going on, right? So we have the seasonality and all that. So that the managed services thing just makes a tremendous amount of sense.
Thanks so much for watching this first segment of AV Week. To see the rest of the episode, click on the link below or go by the website, AVNation.tv. That's AVNation.tv.